Native Americans have been portrayed in a variety of different ways in the media. There's always been an air of mystique surrounding the existence of indigenous peoples of North America. From the noble savage and the wise elder to the medicine man and loyal sidekick. Hollywood is littered with depictions of who they see us to be. Until the activists emerged in the late 1960s and throughout the 70s, we were mostly seen in movies and in the towns that neighbored our reservations. Not to say we didn't live in the same towns and cities as most Americans, went to the same schools and grocery stores, coached the same baseball teams, and worked the same jobs. I'm only suggesting maybe you didn't see us as Indians. Without the feathers and braids, it's hard to tell us apart from you. I'm not trying to be facetious here, but I get it all the time. You don't look Indian. From the expression and comment, I obviously didn't fit the imagery they held in their mind's eye of what a native person was to look like. Which begs the question, what are we supposed to look like? I don't remember when I realized I was Native American. It wasn't something that had to be explained, I just was. Yeah, I was exposed to the big times, reservation life, and the like. I knew I belonged to a distinct people group as far back as I could remember. I didn't know of any other kids who ate seaweed and surf fish on the shores of a beach in Fort Bragg while my gran boiled periwinkle snails for us to consume. Right now would be an ideal time for me to say something really spiritual like, "The ancestors whispered to me by the wind as the waves crashed against the sand, awakened in me up." But that wouldn't be authentic. I didn't choose a traditional way to live. If you ask 10 different Indians what constitutes being traditional, you'd get 10 different answers, by the way. I'd say living as a traditional Indian in modern times would be someone who spoke their native language, hunted and gathered food specific to their Aboriginal land, and practiced spirituality in the same way their ancestors did. That was never modeled to me. It's not an indictment towards anyone in my family, it's simply an observation. I do remember when I began to distance myself from my native identity. I was in elementary school sitting in class as the teacher wheeled in the movie projector. Yeah, I said a movie projector. It was a reel-to-reel film projector that would combine sound recordings with film strips. I'm that old. As the lights were dimmed, the class was treated to a history lesson on the Wounded Knee massacre that took place in South Dakota on December 29, 1890. In the film, there was an image of some of the remains of the Lakota Sioux people lying frozen in the snow after being killed by the U.S. Army soldiers. Something inside of me didn't want to be associated with those dead Indians in the snow. I didn't have the emotional maturity to understand just by me being there was a testament to the resilience of Native peoples. My grandmother didn't choose to distance herself from her Native identity. It was taken from her. At a very young age, she was shipped to the Sherman Indian Boarding School in Riverside, California. The school was for Native children with the goal of assimilating them into mainstream society. My grandmother didn't speak much of the experience, but did say she ran away twice and was caught and brought back. Whatever her experience was, it wasn't a pleasant one. Eventually, she made her way back to Northern California. As a child, I lived close to my grandmother throughout my life. During one of those seasons, we lived with a distant family member on her reservation. We fell on hard times and she allowed us to pitch a couple of tents on her property, so me and my siblings and cousins can live there. Her husband had a strong relationship with alcohol and always had his drinking buddies over. My brother and I would sit and watch them as they transformed from friendly old men to aggressive drunks. They were a colorful group. Some would cry over friends they lost in the war. Others would argue and try to fight each other. They'd be so drunk they'd swing and miss and do a full 360 and fall flat on their faces, almost like cartoon characters. Drinking was always present in my family as far back as I could remember, but these guys were different. Instead of alcohol being present at a birthday party or holiday celebration, it seemed like the wine took center stage and was the event. Among the many stereotypes of Native Americans, the drunken Indian has to be mentioned. There are many theories as to why alcohol has such a devastating impact on Native peoples. I'm not here to dispute or confirm any of them, but the fact is, Natives experience a higher rate of alcohol-related deaths than the rest of the U.S. population. According to the IHS, morbidity and mortality related to alcohol use remain significantly higher for Natives compared to other groups in America. What cemented this relationship with alcohol in Native Americans? Some point to historical trauma. Activist and poet John Trudell had a unique perspective on this issue. The following is a clip of his take on the drunken Indian.
About the whole idea of the drunken Indian, I mean, I don't remember what I said before, but I know without them, we wouldn't be here today, the Native peoples. I mean that, because there was a time as a Native person in America, I mean, obviously we went from being the only people here to where we became the enemy of the people who came to take it away from us. And you know, and this is what genocide and manifest destiny was all about. So we had that experience. And then by the 1900s, by the beginning of the 1900s, pretty much we had all been confined and contained into reservations or whatever, and then taken off into the educational religious systems as children, taken away. And as that was happening, taking the children away, and this was not an aberration. Taking the children of the Native people was the standard. So and feeding them off into the religious educational systems. So basically, they were telling the Native people that we couldn't be who we were anymore, Indian. We couldn't be Indians. We needed to be white. And I think that so here we were, historically speaking, in a situation where we couldn't be who we were, and we didn't want to be, right? Who our oppressor wanted us to be. So I think that's what that whole period of that drunken Indian time, that so-called period of time where the drunken Indian, where that image and that stereotypical thing came. But this is the Indian that saved us. Because this is the Indian that said, I'm not going to, I can't be who I am, and I'm not going to be who you tell me to be. So I'll just be nothing. I'll be something else. I'll just do my time and get through it. I'll erase the pain, and I'll just do what I have to get through it. But I will not become you. And really, I think that, you know, and I think that they're the ones who saved something about us as Native people by refusing to submit. This was their rebellion. This was their way. You know, and then later when the activists came along, see, I always felt that they made it possible for us activists later, because if they hadn't taken that route, they would have had to have the white mind or be destroyed.
I was too young to see their addiction through such a philosophical lens. Maybe that generation was the last to experience the loss of what it meant to be Indian. Maybe the tears and gallons of wine washed away the memory of who they were and what could have been. War-torn souls engaged in the last act of defiance against a system they no longer wanted to be a part of. With the introduction of casinos on tribal lands, have they swung the pendulum closer or further away from cultural and traditional practices? Economic development is good. The love of money is the root of all evil. Only 39% of tribes operate a casino, and the state will fight tooth and nail not to allow them in their suburban towns. They say we'd be encroaching on their land and way of life. The irony. Big time season is upon us. I always look forward to the dancing, beadwork, songs, and familiar faces. When I see the clappers and hand drum, and see those dancers make their way out, I think about those old men my brother and I used to watch. If what John Trudell said is true, we don't have to drink no more. The culture's alive and well. and we're still Indians.
Thank you once again for joining us here at the Boxcar Joe Show. Feel free to leave a comment, hit that like button. It'll help this video get in front of the people it needs to reach. If you're not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell. And we'll see you here next week at the Boxcar Joe Show.